So tonight, I thought we would discuss a very interesting topic, the Tana, Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa. So there's many interesting maisim about Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa the Gemara relates. He was someone who lived in tremendous poverty, we're going to see. He was someone who had tremendous miracles happen to him. And we'll maybe explore a little bit about some of the stories that happened to him. Maybe analyze exactly what the force was that accomplished these things for him, and then maybe we'll try to apply it again as usual to us and see how we can use these ideas for ourselves in our own Judaism. So, just to introduce it a little bit, Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa, he lived towards the tail end of the second Beis HaMikdash. That's when he lived. And it was obviously during the Roman occupation, and things were sort of starting to go downhill in terms of what was happening with the Jewish people. But there was still a Beis HaMikdash, and there was still, the hashgacha that came from having a Beis HaMikdash. So there was still a lot more sort of visible nisim happening in the world. So that sort of sets the stage for this tremendous Tana. Chanina ben Dosa was a Talmid Chacham, a tzaddik, someone who we'll see was one of the main forces that supported the Jewish people during those times. So we're going to talk about the Gemaras in Tractate Tainus. That's where a lot of the stories that occurred with Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa are recorded over here. So the first, again, just to see how perhaps Hashgacha was the divine providence was a little more revealed during that time period, and specifically with a tzaddik like Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa. So the story goes that Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa was going on the way, and he was holding on his head a bucket of salt. What was on his head? He was carrying a bucket of salt. You can imagine the Gadol Ador carrying a bucket of salt on his head. That's what it looked like. So what happened is it started raining. Rain and salt it mishes a little too well. It mixes too well. So all his salt was going to dissolve. It would continue raining. So Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa, he calls out to Hashem. He says, God, help. He said, Ribono Shalom, Master Universe, shall the entire world be comfortable and Chanina be in distress? And of course, the rain immediately stops. And he arrives home with his salt still intact. When he came home, he said to Hashem, so the opposite prayer now, because what's going to happen? The world's not getting enough rain. So he said, shall the entire world be in distress and I'm going to be comfortable? So immediately again, the rain started and there was enough rain for the world. So we see an incredible power of prayer that Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa possessed. We also see that the tsar, the pain, the discomfort of a tzaddik, someone who's very close to Hashem, makes a very big impact. So that's the first thing that we see in the story. We're going to see a few more stories. I'm just going to get a big picture, and then we'll try to zoom in on some of the common themes. So next, the Gemara comments on the poverty that Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa lived in. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, every day a baskol, a heavenly voice, spoke out and said, the entire world gets its food, its water, its money, everything, bishvil, on account of Chanina b'ni. Chanina, my son. Everyone gets their food, water, sustenance on account of him. But Chanina, my son, it's enough for him just to have a kav, a certain measurement of carobs, not a lot of food. From Erev Shabbos to Shabbos, or whatever, from Erev Shabbos to Erev Shabbos. That was all his food. He had a bucket of carobs. That's all he ate. He didn't have enough money to buy bread. He didn't have enough money to buy fruit. He didn't have enough money to buy meat. Forget about it. It's like, I guess for people, parents or grandparents grew up in the Great Depression, they can sort of relate to these ideas that you didn't have what to eat. It was, bread and that was it. So Chanina ben Dosa had even less. He had Caribs. So that's all he had. And yet, the whole world was sustained because of him. Meaning even the very wealthy people, there were very many wealthy people during this time in history. Let's talk about the entire world, the Chinese, the Indians, the Romans, the English, the Incas and the Aztecs, the whole world. What did you say?
No English.
No English yet at that point. So what was what were they called by that point? Help me out. I forget the right term for it. Well, the people who lived in Great Britain or Franco-Saxon, is that what it's called? Okay. So all the people in the entire world were sustained through him, the rich, the poor, everybody. And yet the person who was the source of all of it sustained himself with merely a barrel of Caribs, not even. So this is going to be a theme that we'll see with Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa. Now there's another famous story. The next story here in the Gemara concerns Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa's wife. Now, she had a certain habit that resulted from being impoverished. And she was a little embarrassed. She didn't want people thinking that she was so poor. So what did she do? She would, on Fridays, all the women would bake their bread in their ovens. And if someone was seeing that their fireplace didn't have smoke coming out, it would be a very big question. What happened? Where's your bread? Why is nothing baking in your oven? It's Erev Shabbos. Shabbos is coming. So she was embarrassed. She didn't want to have questions. All they had was Caribs. So what did she do? She started putting in leaves and different things into her oven so that it would appear from outside her house. There's smoke coming up. Oh, there's something in the oven. And no one would ask too many questions, and she wouldn't become embarrassed. That was her custom. That was the thing that she did. Now, one day, thank God I've never experienced this, but some people have, I guess, what's called a nosy neighbor. Want to ask a little too many questions. What's going on? A little too involved in what's going on in their lives. So one day, her neighbor said, "You know what? They don't have any money. They don't have any food. I never see her go to the store. There's no way there's anything in her oven. She's probably just faking it." So what does the neighbor do? She comes in and she forces her way in, essentially. And Chanina ben Dosa's wife, of course, is mortified. I don't want to be embarrassed. So she retreats into the more inner living space in her house. As this lady goes to take a look, what's in Mrs. ben Dosa's oven? So of course she opens up the oven. What does she see? She sees an entire oven full of challah, of the miracle. And she says, come quick, your challahs are burning, you got to take them out. They're about to burn. She says, yeah, don't worry, I was just in the kitchen, I was coming to get the spatula to take out the challahs. And the Gemara concludes and says that really was what she was doing. She really went inside for that. It might have looked like she was embarrassed or something, but she was so used to having nisim, miracles like this happen, that it wasn't that it wasn't surprising for her to see this kind of miracle. The next Gemara, like I said, I'm just bringing a few of these stories just you get a feel for the character of Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa, the things that he went through, and the sort of reality that he lived in, a very different reality than us. And we'll discuss soon how exactly he lived in such a reality. What made him different? So, of course, one day his wife, sort of as maybe some people have had this experience, they sort of get we need more money. Do something. Go to work, do something. We need more money. How long are we going to live in poverty? She asked him. So he said, what should we do? So of course she had a munah. She wasn't a kaifa or anything. So what'd she say? She said, you should pray for mercy, for compassion, that you should be given something of the good that is stored away for you, for the righteous, in the world to come. You should pray that Hashem gives you some of what's stored away for the righteous in the world to come. That's what you should do. That was the plan. That was the get-rich-quick scheme, where everyone has get-rich-quick schemes, a little Amazon, a little real estate, you get rich quick. So the get-rich-quick scheme for tzaddikim, people of Emunah, you daven, maybe a little bit of a cheat, that daven and ask for some of the reward that's stored away for you. That was her plan. So, okay, being a good husband, he listened to his wife, and he started praying. He prayed for mercy. And the next thing you know, a hand comes out of the sky and deposits a golden leg of a table. So now you have an entire gold leg of a table, a gold bar, weighing who knows how much, worth, tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. And that would solve all their financial issues. Most people would be very happy. Except, of course, he goes to sleep. And he has a dream. Now, most people are not supposed to take their dreams seriously. So if you have any dreams like this, don't take it seriously. But when you're someone like Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa, and you're on such a high level of righteousness, your dreams might mean something. So what did he see in his dream? So he saw in his dream an image, people in paradise, in the world to come. And he saw the different righteous people all eating off their tables. They all had 3 legs. And he saw him and his wife, they were eating at a table with only 2 legs. That was the table that they had. So he said to his wife, is that okay with you that we're gonna be the only people in the world to come? Their table is gonna be defective. You want to go to a world to come and have a defective table? You're gonna watch everyone else eating at their table, the beautiful table, 3 legs. I guess they used to have three-leg tables. We have 4-leg tables nowadays, but they used to have 3 legs. And we're gonna only have 2 legs on our table. What's gonna be? You're content with that? He asked his wife. So she said to him, what are we supposed to do? She agreed. I agree. It's a problem. I agree with you. I'd rather be poor, and at least we'll have a table that's complete in the world to come, rather than perhaps being wealthy here in this transient world and having an incomplete table in the world to come. So what'd she say? She said, pray for Rahmanis, pray for mercy, that the leg should be taken back from you. So of course he prays, and eventually the hand came back and it took the leg. So someone said, one of the Tanaim in the Gemara, they said, the second miracle, this miracle that it got taken back, was actually a bigger miracle than the first miracle of it being given. Because the tradition is that things are given from heaven, but they're not taken back in this sense. Meaning if you request your reward in this world, that's it, you got it. You can never redeem it now in the world to come. It's going to be for you now. So it was a very big miracle that they were able to give it back. Now, some of the commentaries, they try to explain, why was she complaining, and what was her original thought, the wife of Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa? First, why was she complaining? And why do you think it would be better to lose out on their world to come just to have wealth here in this world? So I saw, and we see, by the way, that Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa wasn't the one complaining. He was willing to accept the things the way they were, if not for his wife, who was in discomfort. So why was his wife the one in discomfort? Perhaps we can ask a question. So I saw the Ksav Sofer, he says, and this is part of the Messiah, Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa, how did he spend his days and nights? He was immersed in Torah all day and all night. We say, Lulei Sarasa, if not for your Torah, Az Avadati Ba'ini. I would pass away in my poverty. If not for Hashem's Torah, if not for the ability to learn Torah. So a person like that, we can't imagine how much he was immersed in that world, in the world of spirituality. But someone who immerses themselves in the world of spirituality and makes Hashem the focus, they don't feel pain, they don't feel discomfort in the same way that other people do. But Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa's wife, who, as a result of not being obviously a Torah scholar the way he was, she was a very righteous woman and had a tremendous amount of emunah, but that wasn't her profession. She wasn't a Torah scholar the way her husband was. She had to maintain a house. She had to deal with the normal things that a wife had to deal with. So she wasn't completely in the world of ruchnius the way he was. Not that she was supposed to be. That was what she was supposed to be doing. But in as much as that was true, she wasn't immersed in it, and therefore she experienced that discomfort of poverty much more than her husband did. So that was this is what the commentaries say in reference to Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa's wife. So another famous Gemara. So far we've seen examples of his power of prayer, examples of his poverty, the fact that his merit stood as a force for the entire world. And we'll see another few examples. This is a very, very famous Gemara. Probably everyone's heard this Gemara. So it was one Friday evening. His daughter went to go light candles. She lights her Shabbos candles, and she comes to her father very distressed. You know this one?
Most of the others, I don't know about
Yes, this. Let's see. So what'd she say? She told her father, she said, I made a mistake. Instead of putting olive oil in the candles, I put vinegar. And it's going to go out. It's going to go out. Now, just to press pause on the story for a second. It's an interesting thing, because it lit. It started lit. I don't know if this is, could be that itself was not a normal thing. I don't know. I've never tried to light a wick dipped in vinegar. Maybe the scientists here know. Would that even light for a moment? You're not sure.
I don't know, but they had enough money to buy.
They had enough money to buy vinegar, that's true. His daughter, not, I don't know about him, but his daughter had enough. Okay, so I don't know, but I was thinking about that. I'm like, wow, this itself seems to be a miracle. Why did you even light in the first place? I thought it would go right out. So anyway, back to the story. So she was very upset. She lit her Shabbos candles only to realize they're about to go out because I lit vinegar instead of oil. So of course he says to her, don't worry. The one who commanded oil to burn, he could also command vinegar to burn. And of course, the candle burnt the whole through Shabbat. To the extent they even used that flame for their Havdalah candle after Shabbos, after Shabbat. So we see again an example of the miracles that happened for Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa and his family, the people that were close to him. This is a very strange story, the one I'm about to tell. I don't really understand it, but I want to tell it anyway. So it happened, Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa had goats. How do you have goats who are so poor? Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So the reason why he had goats, it's a funny story. It actually isn't. It is somewhat of a funny story. We know there's a mitzvah in the Torah called Hashavas Haveda, to return a lost object. You find a lost object of somebody, you have an obligation to return it. Now, let's say you don't know whose it is. Well, you still have an obligation to safeguard it for them until they come looking for it, or you are able to find out whose it is. So, once upon a time, Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa finds near his home a bunch of eggs, chicken eggs. Of course, these have an owner. Someone owns these chicken eggs. So he takes them home. And since they were chicken eggs, eventually they hatched. And the chicken eggs became little chicks. So of course, running around his home were a bunch of chickens, small baby chicks. I can imagine his wife wasn't very pleased about this. and they couldn't really consume them because it wasn't theirs. So what do? So according to halacha, one of the things you can do is you can sell these and get the money back. Now, it's not enough just to keep the money. Ideally, what someone should do is they should get property that will increase, almost like an investment. So instead of just pocketing the change and keeping it for the owner, he took the eggs, he sold them, and when he got the money, he used them to buy a goat. Now, what do goats produce? Milk. So he started selling the milk, and it kept growing this profit that he was making through his goats. Now, of course, he wasn't able to use any of this. It wasn't his. But he was able to make quite a business for whoever's lost object this was, whoever lost the eggs, to the extent that now he had many goats. So that's the story of how Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa came to be not an owner of goats, but still be responsible for taking care of them. So one day someone comes to Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa, and they tell him, listen, your goats, they're destroying everyone's fields. They're roaming rampant, and they're going and they're eating people's things. They're destroying our fields. Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa knew that it wasn't true. He knew it wasn't true. So he made a test. He said, if it's true what you're saying, that my goats are really ruining people's fields, then wolves should come and devour them. But if it's not true, if they're really not destroying people's fields, then each of my goats should come home, listen to this, with a wolf on their horns that they killed. So, of course, what happens? Comes nighttime, and each of the goat comes back home with a wolf on its horn. You can imagine the spectacle that must have been. A clear miracle being occurring in the merit of Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa. Okay, so one last story here in Maseches Tainis, and then I'll say one more, and then we'll go to a little bit of the analysis of some of these stories. So there was once a lady. She was a neighbor of Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa, and she was building a house. And I guess she didn't hire an engineer because, as she was building the house, she realized that the beams she had didn't extend from one end to the other. So she was left with, I guess, half a house. I'm not really sure what, but it wasn't a good situation for a house. So she came, of course, to Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa. What am I supposed to do? So first he asked her, what's your name? She said her name was Aiku. I don't know what that name means. That was her name. So he gave her a blessing. He said, Aiku, Aiku, may your beams reach from one wall to the other. And of course, they did. The beams elongated miraculously so that they reached from one wall to another. And one of the Tanaim, one of the sages in the Gemara said, he saw the house that this happened to. And each of the beams protruded an amma about, let's say 4 feet beyond the home, beyond the walls of this woman's house. So far here in Tractate of Tainis, we've seen a bunch of examples of Chanina ben Dosa's prayer, his power of prayer, his suffering, the poverty that he underwent, and we've even seen now his care for other people, the way that he fulfilled this mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, and this is the way he came as an aid to a woman who was in need of help building her house. So I'm going to present now another Gemara in Tractate Sanhedrin. Tractate Sanhedrin deals with the laws governing judges and courts, monetary penalties, capital punishments, and things like that. So we all know the verse in Chumash, in the Torah. It says, "Ein od milvado," right? There is none other than Shem. Ein od milvado. There's none other than God. God is the only one. So the question is, maybe you never thought of this question, but if the verse is saying it, well, what's it teaching me that I don't know? I think there's some other force other than Hashem in the world. Why does the Torah have to tell me, Ein od milvado? It seems rather obvious. Ask any child, to what are the Yud Gimel, the 13 principles of faith. They all know there's only Hashem. There's not another God. So why does the Torah have to say, Ein od milvado? Have you ever thought about that? The Torah says it has to be teaching me something, but I already know it. Oh. So Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa said, this is talking even about sorcery. Even with respect to sorcery, a person might have thought that sorcery has an independent power that can go against the ratzon, against the desire, the will of Hashem. Of course, we're taught, this is actually maybe a side point to make, there's really two schools of thought, perhaps, in Judaism regarding sorcery, magic, these sort of esoteric things going on where a person can cast spells. So it's a very, very big discussion between some of the biggest people in Amunah, in Jewish faith, in Jewish tradition, how exactly we regard these things. So the Rambam, Maimonides, has a famous opinion that all of these things never really existed and never really worked. There's no such thing as kishuf, no such thing as sorcery. A person couldn't cast a spell. A person couldn't make these, interesting, do any sort of black magic.
Turn a staff into a snake.
So that's not black. Well, you're saying by the Egyptians, or you're saying by the Egyptians? So it could be the Rambam. I'm not sure. It's a good question. It could be the Rambam would have to understand that incident as discussing sort of maybe optical illusion. I'm not sure. It's a good question. The question is better than the answer. But that's the opinion of the Rambam. The Rambam held that all of these things were never never real. Maybe there was sleight of hand, optical illusions, but they were never to be taken for real. The Vilna Gaon takes the Rambam to task for this opinion. The Vilna Gaon says that it's impossible that these things should exist. Like you're saying, we see it very clearly in the Chumash. The Egyptians had a very strong tradition of magic and were able to do a lot of the things in response to the plagues, where they were able to do essentially similar things even. So the Vilna Gaon had the opinion that the Rambam was a lone opinion. None of the other earlier commentaries agreed to the opinion of the Rambam, Maimonides. So the Vilna Gaon says, for certain, these things are real, they exist, and they're real forces in the world. And the Vilna Gaon says that's the way we go. That's the opinion that we paskin like, that we go with. But it's good to know that this is a debate amongst the authorities about how Judaism sees things like sorcery. Are they not to be taken as real entities, or are they real, like the Vilna Gaon says? In any case, this story that I'm about to say, I think is assuming that it's real. We'll see. So there was once an incident involving Rebbi Chanina. There was a certain woman, again, I don't know exactly how these things worked, but apparently one of the things that they used to do to attack someone using sorcery is they would take dust from beneath this person's foot And that somehow would put a curse on the person. I don't fully understand how this worked, but that's what they would do. So what did Rebbi Chanina say? He said, go ahead and do it. I have no fear. Why? Because it says, Ein od milvado. There's nothing except Hashem. And if you succeed in harming me, it's only due to Hashem's decree. So that's why he was unafraid of this woman's sorcery. He was unconcerned because he said, anything that happens to me is only because of Hashem's decree. Sorcery has no independent power. He never said it didn't have power. It could work. But it has no independent power, meaning that it's nullified in relationship to the ratzon, to the will of God. Okay, so those are the few of the stories that I wanted to tell about Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa. Does anyone have any things they want to say? Any observations? Any questions about some of these stories? Okay, so if that's the case, then I'll go on a little bit. Yeah?
There are people there, right?
Yeah. So, the two themes maybe we'll focus on. One is this theme of that we're seeing the miracles we saw. Tons of miracles. The other major theme we just saw was his poverty. So let's first start on the subject of miracles, Nisim. So we saw in the last story, the main defense that Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa had against dark magic was his recognition of the concept Ein od milvado. There is nothing other than Hashem. When a person realizes that there's nothing outside of Hashem's will, whether it's evil, things that look like they're evil in the world, whether it's forces like magic, whether it's forces like governments, hostile Arab regimes in the world, all these different things, at the end of the day, they all only gain, the influence they have in the world is only according to what Hashem allows them to have. But it's all coming from Hashem. That's the concept of Ein od milvado. There's nothing other than Hashem. Even though it looks like there are things that have independent will, it's all coming from Hashem. I'll share a story. First, really, I'll share a quote from the Sefer the Nefesh HaChaim. He talks about this Gemara that we just spoke about regarding Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa. And he brings this Gemara, and he says the reason why Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa was able to perform miracles like the one we saw with the with the vinegar, that he said, just as oil should light, this vinegar should also light, is because of Rebbi Chanina's mastery and focus on the concept of Ein od milvado. Rav Chaim Volozhiner says in Nefesh HaChaim, he says that a person's, the hashgacha, the level of divine providence that a person experiences, and thereby will experience miracles, is to the extent that he binds his mind to the concept of Ein od milvado. To the extent that he mentions, this is actually quite a famous thing, a very, very powerful tool that a person can use if they're ever in trouble. It's important for people to know this. Uve emes, he says, in truth, this is a very, very powerful thing. To remove, I'm translating what he's saying, to remove and to nullify from upon a person any harsh judgments, any desires that go against him, anyone who desires to do him harm. He's about to say how you can remove them from yourself. Make any sort of will that goes against yours and nullify them. Is when a person puts into his heart to say, Hashem is the true God, there's none other than him, there's no power in the world, or any world, And everything is full, the whole world, all of existence is only filled with Hashem's oneness. And through that, a person nullifies in his heart, with a complete nullification, all of the other forces. And he's not concerned at all about any other force in the world other than Hashem. When he does that, automatically what's going to happen is all those other forces become nullified. So this is the very powerful, what's called Rav Chaim Volozhiner's Segula, which is that if ever is a person in trouble, in danger, he can always meditate on this concept of Ein Od Milvado, and to plant that firmly in his heart. It's said about the Brisker Rav. Brisker Rav was one of the leaders of the Torah world. He was able to escape World War II, but he had to flee during World War II from Poland. He went through Vilna. It's a whole crazy story how he got out. But as he was leaving sort of the area where the Germans had control, it was very dangerous. And he testified about himself that he meditated upon this concept of Hashem's oneness constantly during his trip. And he encountered many dangerous items. He encountered a city that was entirely overrun by the Nazis. Their name should be erased. And that was something a city where he went and it was totally infested with them. And he ended up having no problem. He said there was one moment that he lost focus. He was approaching a border crossing. And for one moment, he took his mind off of this concept. And he said immediately he felt a shoulder grab him, a hand grab him on the shoulder, trying to pull him. And immediately he said he refocused himself on this item, on Hashem's oneness, and he said that he was freed. There's other stories too. This is something that is actually spoken a lot about in the more recent Musar Svarim. This concept of Chaim Volozhiner's Segula. To meditate on Hashem's oneness and realize that there's nothing that can happen, no will in the world that's outside of Hashem's will. Ultimately, Hashem's will is what prevails. So that's one item that we have that I think we see Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa is a great exemplar of. The other item that I wanted to discuss is his poverty. Now, there's very important symbolism in one of the stories that we told. When they took from heaven the leg of a golden table, it's important to realize that their table would have only had 2 legs, not 3. Only had 2, not 3. What does that represent? Yeah?
Well, there's one you would fall over.
It's a good question. Could be. It's a good point. But everyone knows the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The world stands on 3 things. Torah, avoda, service, which is prayer perhaps, and gemilut chasadim. Those are the 3 things the world stands on. Now, we said earlier, one of the first Gemaras that we quoted said that the whole world is sustained through the merit of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. He was the person who provided sustenance for the entire world. Imagine that. A person can own a company, and in addition to making a lot of profit, he's also providing salaries to thousands of, tens of thousands of people perhaps. Jeff Bezos, I don't know how many people he provides a salary for, but it's an amazing thing, right? So a person can do that. Or you could be like Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa and provide the salary for the entire world. His spiritual merit, created physical effects, physical hashpah, what's the right word for hashpah, like a bounty in the world. That was the power of Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa. If so, why was he so poor? So in order for it to be a true act of kindness that he was doing for the world, Chaim Volozhiner says in his Sefer Ruach Chaim that if he would also be getting benefit from what he was doing, that would lower the quality of the Gemilut Chasadim that he was doing. The chesed, the kindness that he was doing, wouldn't be on the same level if he was getting personal benefit from it. So therefore, it had to be that his merit provided for everyone else except him. That his merit provided for everyone, the entire rest of the world, except for Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa and his family. That way, it can be considered a true kindness. Now, back to the table, the imagery of the the table's legs, that he would have only had 2 legs, his table. Why? He would have had the leg of Torah, he would have had the leg of Avodah, but he would have been missing the leg of Gemilut Chasadim. He wouldn't have had that leg. Therefore, he needed to be impoverished. It needed to be that he wouldn't gain any benefit from what he was doing. So perhaps just to think about us in our own way, there's really two major lessons we can take from Chanina ben Dosa and apply to ourselves. The first is the lesson of Ein Od Milvado. We can use this in our own lives. Everyone goes through issues and things. The more a person focuses on Hashem's unity, on the fact that there's no will outside the will of Hashem, and this is a topic that one can learn about for many, many years, the more he draws Hashem's individual, tailored hashgacha, divine providence, into his life. So a person can take a few minutes every day, maybe before prayer, after prayer, and think for a couple moments, just everything that's going on today is from Hashem. Everything I'm about to do, I'm handing over to Hashem. Okay, and then you go out and you make all your efforts that you need to make, but just realize that anything that goes on in your life, good and the bad, that's all from Hashem, and you draw through that more divine providence into your life, and that can only be good. The next thing is the true way to be goimel chesed, the true way to give over of chesed without the expectation of anything in return. Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa had the power to provide for so many people through his merits. Every Jew also has that power too. Every Jew can say, you know what? I'm about to learn some Torah, and with the Torah that I'm learning, I want to benefit either someone who's ill that they know, someone needs a merit. Unfortunately, the war that's going on in Israel, our brothers and sisters over there, the soldiers, they all need a lot of merit. We can produce merit through our own actions, through learning Torah, through davening, saying Tehillim, Psalms. There are so many ways that we can generate merit, if not on the same level as Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa, but on a very big level. We can provide that merit for people, and when we don't expect reward for it, when we don't expect tangible benefit in this world, then we're acting with the same trait of chesed, of kindness, as Rebbi Chanina ben Dosa. So both of these ideas should be very, very empowering for all of us, and we should really think about the situation that's going on all over the world for the Jewish people, and try to connect as much as we can to that situation in order to raise our level of Judaism and Jewish practice and Torah learning and prayer and faith in God. And through that, we can really have an effect on what goes on for the Jewish people. So I want to wish everyone a good night.